How you going, everyone? This is the final devlog of my little game, Wombatvania, aka the last few days of the week-long chaos sprint before the Let's Break Games showcase that my game got accepted into. I was rapidly running out of time, but in the past week I'd managed to endow my Wombat with the powers of dashing and flight, make the camera behave, kind of, and fix a whole heap of bugs.
Good job.
Check out my last two videos to see how this week started.
No thanks.
Oh, okay. I crammed more into this devlog than the last two combined, so I was a little too stressed out to record everything. In this video, the final days, I add a pushable box in a rough looking workshop, build the whole level, clean up the UI, and fix as many bugs as I can, as quickly as I can, before the deadline. First up, I finally added a workshop, a key part to the game since day one, but until now is just this sad, offensively green rectangle which didn't really do much at this point. I wanted to make this gameplay loop a little different from other Metroidvanias by making the player have to return to the workshop throughout the playthrough. Not only to craft new ability suits out of the collectibles, but to actually equip them as well. You can only wear one at a time, so even if you've crafted a bunch, you've still got to come back to the workshop each time you want to swap.
Well, that seems annoying.
No, it makes it different. Shut up. At this point, touching the offensively green rectangle after grabbing 5 coins would just toss you into the loadout screen, which still looked pretty rough. Each of the list items were technically abilities, and the second one is technically the swim ability, which was technically only available because I got 5 coins, so most of the back-end logic was working, but the UI needed some serious help. I wanted to start by making it a little smoother, clearer, and properly linked with the coin count. I showed some of this in my last video, so I'll try to keep this part quick. I workshopped the workshop, or store as I called it at this point, first, since it was going to be the more simple one out of the two UI scenes. I still hadn't made art for the abilities yet, so I just slapped them on cards with prices and made a white rectangle jump between them.
Oh wow, that's some high-tech stuff.
Thanks.
I was being sarcastic.
Oh really? Was that
sarcasm?
After getting the back-end functionality working properly, I moved on to the loadout scene, which was going to have the more fancy scrolling system. Reminder, this is what the loadout looked like at this point. I started by putting all the wombats on cards like I did with the workshop. Fun fact, a group of wombats is called a wisdom, also sometimes called a mob or colony. Anyway, I ran into a few new placement problems, like the second wombat's image being too high and the text hanging out down here for some reason. I fixed that, but wanted to make the cards a little darker when they go back to the left or right, and for the images to black out if they're not available. I got that working, but I also wanted the cards to actually slide smoothly, which I got kind of working, but they weren't scaling up and down at this point. I got the scaling working, but the cards would seem to slide out from the back of the deck. After all that, it looked like this.
I mean, I'll be honest, it's not great.
Yeah, I know there's no art for the abilities at this point, and the UI isn't exactly attractive or informative, but I'll get to that later on in this video. Next up, I wanted to transform this sad green rectangle into an actual workshop. First step, add a little UI pop-up when the character walks into it, eventually a big red B telling you to press the button. The B button, that is. I moved the prompt to sit under the workshop instead of above the character, and then wired it all up. The workshop object has a hidden child object, the button prompt, that the code activates when the wombat walks in front of it. Meanwhile, the wombat has a script that checks if this chunky hitbox is touching the workshop. Fun fact, wombats are the second largest marsupial behind the red kangaroo. Anyway, if the hitbox is touching the workshop and the player presses B, the event on building enter is triggered for the level manager to listen out for. And the level manager then tells the game manager to switch to the workshop scene.
Wow, I'm sure glad you told us how that works in detail.
Okay, before I show you what it actually looks like in game when you press B, I've got to jump forward in time to the last minute art for a bit. I had the swim, dash and fly abilities working, but they were currently just represented by colour swaps, so it was time I actually drew some sprites, at 4 AM, the morning of the showcase. Recording everything basically got pushed aside, so I'll just have to show you the results. Also, you should definitely like the video and subscribe for more like it if you're digging the video so far. Like how wombats dig their burrows.
Yeah, I got it.
Fun fact, they're actually the second largest burrowing animal in the world, behind pregnant polar bear mothers when digging out their maternity dens. First up, swim. I just slapped a scuba tank on the Wombat. It was a little rough, but I didn't have time for second drafts and I'd already spent too long on this one. Ideally, the suit would have been its own sprite, but combining it with the character sprite saved some precious coding time, and I didn't really have much of that left. Next up, Dash. It turned into a bottle at some point in the drawing process, because, I guess, I thought it would be cute and fun.
It is.
Oh, thanks. Anyway, this one's rougher than the scuba gear, but I liked it enough to move on. Especially since it's only going to be like this big on the screen anyway. And finally, Fly. This poor sprite was clearly drawn under severe sleep deprivation. You can practically see the sun rising and the rushness of each successive piece. I also threw together this rough workshop sprite.
Ew.
Again, it's 4 AM and I've just had an all-nighter of coding, so be nice.
No.
Fun fact, wombats have all-nighters all the time, since they're mostly nocturnal animals. I chucked the workshop sprite into the game and squashed a few bugs and it looked like this. Walk up to the workshop and you get hit with the classic red B prompt. Simple, stylish, sleep deprived. Alright, back to the actual UI for the workshop and loadout, but now after drawing the abilities art. Reminder, this is what the workshop looked like at this point, and the loadout. Both working but pretty bare bones at this point. After adding the new ability art and tidying up the UI to make it a little more presentable, and I do mean a little, it worked like this. When the character approaches the workshop, you get prompted to press B. When you do, you're taken to this scene, where you can choose to craft a new suit, or change into one you already have. Ideally the workshop and loadout would be in separate buildings, but my lack of time management meant they just had to be awkward roommates. At this point I have 5 sticks. Oh yeah, did I mention? The coins are sticks now. The coins were always a placeholder and my dad was like, what about sticks? And it fit the vibe, so I rolled with it.
Wait, so you craft a scuba tank and that metal helicopter thing out of sticks?
Yes, don't worry about it.
And a bottle? How does that
Anyway, with enough sticks, the workshop lets you craft the scuba gear. There's no title screen though. I apparently never added that back in. Craft the gear and you're taken to the loadout, or shed, where you can suit up. And there it is, a wombat wearing a scuba tank. What a quirky little world I've conjured up. Alright, back to the night before the showcase again. With the core gameplay loop done, I realised I needed one last thing to keep the wombat from wandering off into places it shouldn't be able to. Enter the final puzzle mechanic, the pushable block.
Oh wow, nothing says innovative game design like a feature from 1988.
If I had more time, I wanted to make the wombat's cube-shaped poop be the pushable item in the game after reading this comment on one of my last videos. Fun fact, wombat poop is cube-shaped. The box's code is pretty simple. If the wombat's touching it and the box is on the ground, it'll attempt to not go above a maximum horizontal speed. If it's not being pushed, it decelerates to a stop, and if it's in the air, it stops all horizontal movement and just falls to the ground. Okay, fast forward a little bit to the morning of the showcase again. Last time, I promise. I turned the box into a chunky 2x2 square and slapped on a quick design.
Ew.
Be nice.
No.
I don't have any footage of me drawing it, but it is a pretty ugly box, so I wouldn't want to put you through that anyway. After ironing out a few bugs and chucking it in the game, it looked like this. I can now use the box to block paths, like flying up, pushing it down, and accessing it later with a different ability. Or create shortcuts, like having to push it from the other side to open a two-way gap. It's a simple, all-purpose puzzle piece, and especially perfect because at this point I had zero time for anything fancy. Okay, I lied, one more final jump back a little. Still the morning of the showcase, after coding the box, but before making art for it. It was finally time to build an actual level, since up until now I'd been testing everything in a glorified sandbox. I grabbed a lined notebook and a pencil, and actually started by planning the overall solution first to then design the level around that. I imagined 5 areas that each had restricted access, forcing the player to craft new abilities. Ignore the chaotic handwriting. I'd been awake for like 30 hours and needed to leave for the showcase soon.
Ah yes, the perfect time to do your most important design work.
I know, right? Anyway, it says things like, get 5 sticks in area 1 with no ability. Craft swim for 5 sticks. Or, access area 3 with fly. Unlock area 3 for dash with fly. Then I drew out how the 5 zones would all fit together, and then drew each one individually in more detail. After that, it was time to actually implement the level in Unity. I first blocked it out with brown squares, planning to worry about the pretty stuff later. This took a lot of back and forth testing, like with this jump that wasn't supposed to be possible, so I reshaped the level. I mapped out all 5 areas in the same way, tweaking the scale as I went, and sent working builds of the game to my brother for rapid fire playtesting while I tackled the art. Then came adding the cosmetics and final touches because I had like 2, maybe 3 hours left. I was so sleep deprived I couldn't tell if time felt like it was speeding up or slowing down. I didn't record the cosmetics process either, but I still only had 2 actual items besides the ground tiles anyway, a grass tree and something vaguely resembling spin effects, so you're not really missing out on much. After a final round of playtesting and tweaks, the game was finally game enough to pack up and leave for the showcase. This is how the gameplay loop works. You start from the menu and then select the only available ability, none. But ooh, what are those mysterious locked suits? You run around collecting sticks, come back to the workshop, craft the scuba suit, access new areas to find more sticks, and so on. Without any food apparently. My argument is that, fun fact, Wombat's guts can hold food for 70 hours, and it takes them around 4 to 6 days to digest a single meal. The loop forces you to swap suits strategically, like having to use Dash, a later suit, to push a box down, which then unlocks that area for Scuba, the first suit, so you have to change back into that to get that area's underwater loot. The showcase itself was equal parts exciting, nerve-wracking, and exhausting. I was running on fumes at that point, but it was awesome seeing real people play what I knew was barely a game 30 hours earlier. Everyone's projects were so cool. I spent most of my time playing theirs, so I didn't have to awkwardly watch people struggle through mine.
If you can't see them suffer, it's not happening.
Exactly. Also, I didn't even think there'd be this many people involved in Perth's local indie game dev scene. It was a great opportunity to chat about coding and get some solid feedback. This game was supposed to take a few weeks. It took a few months. On and off, to be fair. I just kept expanding the scope. At one point I even planned on swapping the suits for Australian animals, like a kangaroo for high jumps, a cockatoo for flying, and a platypus for swimming. It got out of hand. But anyway, I actually finished it. Technically. Yes, technically, I said that. I actually finished it, technically. Real people played it, and I learned heaps in the process. If I wanted to spend a little more time on it, I'd probably add better animations for the abilities, better art for the workshop and box, some shader effects, and definitely something else in the world besides grass trees and spin effects. Maybe I still will someday.
No, you won't.
But for now I'm moving on to a new game with a totally different playstyle and mechanics, so stick around for the next set of devlogs coming soon. Thanks for watching me stumble through this chaotic little development journey of my first technically complete game. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. See ya folks, have a good one.